Welcome, United States History 2 students. This is a lesson from Unit 4, the Roaring Twenties, the Jazz Age, where I'm going to discuss some important cultural innovations of the 1920s. When you think of the word innovation, you should think about something that's new, something that becomes more widespread, becomes more popular, changes the way that we look at life. And in the 1920s, there were certainly a lot of things in art, culture, mass media, popular culture that would be considered innovations. The first thing that we talk about when we're looking at cultural innovations is art and literature. During this time in the 1920s, if you were an American artist or if you were an American writer, your writing really focused on what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of the modern world? Because this world, right after World War One, it's changing a lot. So what what is the meaning? What is the purpose? Maybe some traditional ideas are going to be challenged, things are going to be done differently. Those were the themes, those were the subjects of many American writers. If you take a look at this presentation, the top right hand picture is from Manhattan's Greenwich Village. And in Greenwich Village, many writers during the 1920s would go and live this kind of bohemian lifestyle and kind of gather, share ideas, and produce a lot of their writings. Chicago's South Side, which is the picture that's on the bottom right hand portion of your screen, that's also a hub for arts and literature during the 1920s, where again, that bohemian lifestyle, kind of an open minded lifestyle, big thinking is what occurred in terms of arts and literature. When we talk about painting, modern American art, the pictures that you see on the right-hand side of the screen are some examples of some modern American art. And in the 1920s, if you were an artist, you really wanted to create something that focused on people's inner moods and that provoked some of those feelings because people were very unsure due to all of the changes that was happening, because of the end of the war, because of new technology, booming economy, a lot of values changing. So it came out in the art. And it came out in the art in different ways. In the top right-hand corner, we have a painting of John Marin. And what John Marin was very famous for doing is that he would create paintings that would represent New York City. And, if you know anything about New York City during the 1920s, a lot of change, a lot of upheaval, a lot of shift from what we traditionally thought about cities. So that's an example of one of his paintings. If you look at the top right-hand corner, that second picture, that kind of looks like a couple of buildings, that's Charles Sheeler. And he was a painter, and he used a technique known as cubism. And if you hear the word cubism, you should hear the word cube. And I'm talking about geometry class. So as you can see, very symmetrical in terms of what the shapes look like, definitely look like a cubical shape. So that's Charles Sheeler, and that was a very famous 1920s artist. Then you have Edward Hopper. If you look at the bottom left-hand picture with the young woman sitting in the restaurant, you'll notice that this is a realistic painting. This is from the 1920s, and this is showing realism and really, getting her emotion, getting all of the details, so that you almost kind of would take a second look at this and think it was a photograph. So again, that's a specific form of modern American art in the 1920s. The last one, Georgia O'Keeffe, bold landscapes. She loved flowers. This is supposed to, again, all of these are different types of paintings, but they're supposed to focus on your inner mood. You're supposed to be able to look at these, reflect on these, think of those feelings, especially regarding all of the changes. That's the purpose of modern American art in the 1920s. When we talk about arts and literature, there are some specific poets and writers that come to mind. Like I said earlier, poets and writers really were kind of thinking about all of the changes that were occurring in modern life. Some writers were critical of the way that the class was laid out, the class system where you have kind of your haves and your have-nots. Very critical of the idea of consumerism. Remember, people kind of have that pent-up demand because in World War I, it was all about sacrificing. After the war was over, you wanted to buy new shoes. You wanted to buy new technology like a washing machine to make your life easier. So poets and writers, they would kind of be critical of that materialism, of that consumerism. Many writings, whether they were books or whether they were poems, they challenged traditional beliefs, and they wanted to say, if life is going to keep changing this much, if this upheaval is going to continue, what is life really about? So that's something that's important. Overall, a big thing that you need to take from this lesson is that popular culture showed that because of the time period, because of the political and specifically, most importantly, the economical situation of the time, people had more time than ever to experience and to appreciate pop culture. So because of the economic fortune, because of the new tech, many Americans had more time to spend money and more leisure time to actually enjoy what they spend. We saw this in movies and radio shows. Originally, kind of leading up to the 1920s, films were silent films. So you would have subtitles on the screen, and then you would generally have in a theater, maybe somebody playing the piano with a little bit of a background to kind of, let you know if it's going to be an action sequence, is it going to be a dramatic sequence, is it a tragic sequence, so on and so forth. But all of that changed in 1927. In 1927, the first movie where people actually were talking in it, where characters were talking and you could hear what they said, that's called The Jazz Singer. And this ushers in what we know as the golden age of Hollywood. After this came out and throughout the 1920s, throughout the rest of the 1920s, the 1930s, and so on, we start to see all different kinds of pictures talk about life, talk about war, movies about relationships, things that are very relatable, things about Christianity and different Christian values. And again, some of those were challenged because of the time period. So it was the golden age of Hollywood. It certainly came of that. And in the New York City's Tin Pin Alley, that's where a lot of shows, movies were kind of written. It's kind of the Hollywood before the Hollywood, and they were many shows were produced, were spoken, were delivered over radio shows. The last part of pop culture that you must absolutely have a familiar aspect with is sports. Prior to the 1920s, professional sports really weren't a thing. I know that's so hard for us to understand because right now professional sports feels like it dominates a lot of part of our culture. But 100 years ago, before the 1920s, you might have been a New York Yankee, but you played for the New York Yankees at night, and maybe you were a garbage man during the day. So, like professional sports were really almost kind of like something for fun. Well, all that changed in the 1920s because with the prevalence of mass media, the use of the radio, now sports became more widespread. And because they were more widespread, they became more popular. You had fans in a bunch of different places and able to follow the game. Babe Ruth is one of the pioneers. If you're a professional athlete today, or an aspiring professional athlete, or if you appreciate professional athletes, you really got to give a lot of credit to Babe Ruth. He is one of the people that made it so popular and made it a career. Jack Dempsey was also an extremely popular boxer during the 1920s. Gertrude Ederle in the bottom right-hand picture there, she was an extremely phenomenal swimmer and had international fame when she actually swam the English Channel. We also see things like college football become extremely popular. So that is something else to see kind of the growth really to be something more popular to what we see today. Okay? At this time, I am going to conclude this video. Please make sure that you answer the Ed puzzle question, and please make sure that you read the Reading Essentials and Study Guide so that you can pick up some of the details that I may have left out in this presentation. After you finish this video and after you finish that Reading Essentials, I require you to please log on to Google Classwork and complete the check on cultural innovations. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.